Be'ezus Hashem, today's daf is Masech Avodah Zarah, daf Nun Ches, number 58, and we will start from the story on daf uh, Nun Zayin Amud Beis, Hahu Avodah, about like 8 lines from the bottom, 7 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara. Let's just introduce the fact that if a goy would actually take wine from a yid and start, let's say, pour himself a drink, so then a yid cannot drink from that wine anymore. Why? Because it becomes asr bahana. Why? Because we are concerned that maybe when he was pouring the wine for himself, he was thinking that he's doing something for his avodah zarah. We don't know for sure. That's called stam yainim, right? He didn't. We don't know what his intention was, but the fact that he poured the wine, that asks the wine. Now we're going to deal with people, goyim, stirring wine and moving wine around, but they don't know that it's wine. So let's see this story. Ahu uvda, there was this story, the Hava Mechuzah that was in Mechuzah. Also, there was a guy came, Ayala Chanusa Yisrael, came into a wine store belonging to a Jew. Amalahu, she asked, Islu Chamel Zabuni, do you have any wine to sell me? Amalei, Amrilei, like the people in the store, the Jewish people in the store said, we don't have any wine to sell you. Haba Yosef Chamra Badavla. There was a wine, some wine, let's say, by the counter, right, in the store. And so the guy says, "What do you mean you not have wine?" Shade Bey Yada. He stuck his hand in Shik Bey and stirred the wine that was in this pitcher. So and Amar Lahu, he said to him, Hailav Chamrahu, that's not wine, you know. So when he stirred the wine, the wine with his hand, right? So what did he do? Did he have intention? Um, did he know that it's wine when he put his hand in there? And therefore he had intention. It's possible that while he was stirring the wine, he had intention to do something for his avodah zarah. So what's the din with that wine? So before the story finishes, before we talk about that, shakla hech berische, the Jew took the wine in his anger. Now that the guy touched the wine in the vessel in the pitcher, shadyai ledani, he took the whole pitcher and poured it into his barrels, and as if to say to the guy, this is stuff you can't drink from. Now, the problem is that the guy already stirred the wine that was in the pitcher. So what do you do with now? And then the Jew made it even worse, seemingly, by pouring it now back into a barrel. Shari Rava Lazabuni Legayim. So Rava permitted you to sell it to Goyim because the guy, when he stirred the wine, he had it was without intention. He was just trying to. He was just trying to not so much. We don't know if he knew it was wine. He just wanted to see if it was wine. So therefore, Rava held that it's mutter. It's mutter to benefit from. Now, obviously, you can't drink it. That's why he said you could only sell the wine in the barrel to a goy. A Jew can't drink it anymore, but it's mutter bahana. Since it was touched by a goy, poured by a goy, shaloi bekavana means he didn't know it was wine. But if legale Rav Huna bar Achini Rav Huna bar Rav Nachman, Rav Huna argued with Rava, and they held that it's aser. Why would it be aser? Because they felt that the goy knew that it was wine. He knew the Jews are lying to him. So therefore, to make his point, he stuck his hand purposely into the wine. He knew it was going to be wine, and stirred it. And probably it's possible that he had kavana. It's possible that he had kavana that this would be for nisach. So there's the Gemara. So the Gemara continues the story. Nafki Shipur de Rava Vishari. Rava announced from his hechsher place that this wine was permitted. Nafki Shipur de Rav Huna bar Chini, Rav Huna bar Nasan, the Rav Nachman the Asri. They asered their hechsher asered. They asered the wine and they didn't allow the store to sell it to even goyim. We go to Amud Beis. Go to Nur Chesam Alf. Ikla Rav Huna Breidev Nachman Lemchuza. So Rav Huna came to Mechuza, which was the place where Rava was. And Rava, this story about Rav Huna coming to Mechuza, where Rava was, happened at a later time. In other words, we're going to see later on in the Gemara, Rava realized that he was wrong. That even if a guy touches wine, shaloi bekavana, without any intention, didn't know it was wine, and stirs it, it'll make it asa. But at this point, Rava retracted it, and because he was embarrassed to face Rav Huna that he made a mistake, so what he told Amalei Rava Rav Yakum Shamoy, Rava told Rav Yakum his attendant, Troik Galei, the Leinese and Asha Denitrid, close the door and don't let anybody come to my room to discuss any learning with me. Basically, he didn't want to get into a conversation with Rav Huna, and therefore he didn't allow Rav Huna to meet with him. Nevertheless, Olagabe, Rav Huna came directly, maybe the attendant wasn't looking, and he entered the office where Rava was. Amalei ki gav namai. What's the story with that case with the wine? Is it mutter or usser? Amalei, so Rava said, you're right. The guy stirred it with his hand, and he stirred the wine with his hand that was in the pitcher. So that wine is also afila bahanoah. That wine was also bahanoah. So says the Gemara, "V'homahu da'ama shichshich ein oisei yain nesach." If you are the one that said that if the guy just stirs the wine, doesn't know if it's wine and just wants to see if it's wine, it's not yayin nesach. You said that it's mutter bahana. Didn't you just say that? I heard from you. I heard people are saying that you're saying shich. If a guy just stirs the wine, doesn't know it's wine, ain't oisa yayin nesach. Now you're telling me in your office that you're saying it would be yayin nesach, it would be asr even to benefit from. So the Rava said, you're right. But in other words, the story continued where the Jew took the wine that was in the pitcher and poured it into a barrel. So what I meant to say is that the rest of the barrel is mutter b'hanoah. It's just that part of the barrel that you poured the wine from the pitcher there, that remains also. So suppose there's the pitcher had 1 gallon and the barrel had 20 gallons, and you poured 1 gallon into the 20 gallons. So when you sell it, you should only sell 21 gallons to a guy, but only take the price of 20 gallons. So the part that represented the wine that was in the pitcher, you don't make a profit on that. You don't benefit from that. That's what I meant to say. But true, I agree with you that the fact that the guy stuck his hand into a pitcher to see that if it was wine and stirred it, we're going to aser it afila bahana, even with hana. Amar Rava. Now, Rava, this story happened at the end, but now the Gemara says what brought Rava to change his mind. Originally, Rava held that if a guy just puts his hand into a pitcher to see if it's wine, it does not make it aser bahana, because he's just testing to see if it's wine. Amar Rava said, Ki asila pumpadisa, when I came to Pumpadisa, akfa nachmeni shmaitzu masnisin the aser. Nachmeni, Abaya asked me questions from a teaching, and even a brisa that's aser. And therefore, because of that, therefore, I retracted my statement. Abaya asked me a question, Shmaitzi. He told me about a story. There was the story in Nahardoi where a guy stirred the wine without intention. Let's say, he was just, let's give the example. The guy didn't know that the Jewish wine is on the table, and he just absentmindedly stirred the Jewish wine. Also Shmuel. Shmuel said that wine now becomes Asr Bana. But the same story happened to Asr Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan answered it. So therefore, the Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan both agree that this case of stirring the wine would be Asa. So Rava said that to Abaya, maybe that's not true. Maybe the wine is mutter bahana. And the story of Shmuel was just because people were, going light on Yayin Nesach. So therefore, Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan came out strong and said it's Asa. Va'amri and I told them, people in Tiberia and people in Ardoi are not learned people. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel went strong and said it's asr. But the din would be, the true din, the true halacha should be, it's not asr b'hana. V'amali, so Abaye said to me, you mean to tell me Tiberia and Ardoi ain't been Torah, the where Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel lived, the people living there were not B'nai Torah, but the Mechuzah B'nai Torah, where you live, are the people are B'nai Torah. I mean, it doesn't make sense that was the reason why Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Aser. Stirring is Aser, that's the law. That was the original law. Then Abai says, let me show you a brisa that disagrees with you. Masnisa, there's a brisa that disagrees with you. The Agadomim, there was inspectors of a goy. Shekadak b'menechas v'hela, I should tell him in a case v'hechzi l'chavis. There were goyish inspectors that would come to inspect the Jewish wine producers, and there was a straw there that the Jew put into the barrel, or there was a cup of wine, and they would taste it and to see. They would see the wine. The wine would come into a cup, let's say, or the wine coming from the barrel would be sucked up and come into a cup, and they would taste it to see the quality of the wine that the Jew was selling. Does it meet the government standards? Then what happened was the inspector turned it back and turned the wine back into the extra wine that he didn't finish tasting. He poured it back into the barrel. So now this is a story of pouring shloi b'kavana. Obviously, he's not intention to pour. He just wants to return. It's obvious he wants to return the extra wine into the barrel. Not in question that the goy just is pouring wine for nisach. So zehoya ma'isa, but it was a story for asruah, and they asared the whole wine in the barrel. Maila bahana. It must mean that they asared the whole barrel bahana. So Rava said, since that brisa you want to prove against me, that's not true. That brisa is saying that they asked the barrel of wine b'shtia with drinking. But hana, it's like me. If the guy has no intention to pour the wine, so he's not pouring it for the intention of pouring it, then it would still be mutter b'hana. So if that's the case, if that was the case with that story with the inspector, list the yamachar. Why does the brisa say they asked all the wine in the barrel? They should say that the brisa should say that the wine in the barrel could be sold to a guy, because when you want to say something is also to drink but mutter bahana, you say the expression yimocher, that you could only sell the wine to a guy. It's mutter to benefit from. So the fact that the brisa says after the inspector tasted the wine, poured it back into the barrel, the whole barrel becomes aser, it must imply that the whole barrel now becomes aser bahana. Kidutani seifa, because we find that the brisa uses such an expression in a different case. Cherem goy, a goy that is sort of meshuga. He's like nuts. Shahayshid yadai lagavi sticks his hand into a barrel. Ukusava shel shemen he thought that the barrel held oil. V'nimtza shel yayin, and became that there's wine. So here there's a different story. He didn't even know there's wine there. He stuck his hand into the barrel and thinking that there's oil, and it turns out there was wine. So he had no kavanah at all for wine. So zehoy ma'asav amru yimacher. There, their story was, and the brisa says that the wine is now also to drink because a guy touched it, but you can sell it to a guy. It's mutter bahana. So when the brisa wants to say something that's mutter bahana, it says yimacher. So in the first case of the brisa, where the inspector comes, knows that it's wine, if it only meant and returned the wine after he finished drinking and testing back into the barrel, if it only meant that it's also to drink, but mutter bahana, then the brisa should say yimacher, sell the barrel to a guy. And the fact that the brisa says asur, the whole barrel is asur, must mean the whole barrel is asur bana tiyufta. The Rava, this is a refutation of Rava tiyufta. So let's get back to the story. The story began where a guy walked into a Jewish wine store. He knew they sell wine. So he asked the owners of the store, do you sell wine? And they say no. Then there's a pitcher on the table. He says, sticks his hands in and stirs it, right? So the goy knows that there's wine in there. Okay, let's assume that he probably suspects that there's wine in there. Rava originally said that that wine is mutter bahana because he's stirring it. He's stirring it, but his intention is to prove that there's wine. He's not pouring the. He's not pouring it to pour himself a drink or something like that. He's stirring it, so he probably did not have any intention for avodah zarah. Comes along, Rav Huna says that it's asr. That wine is asr bahanoah. That wine is asr bahanoah. And the reason it's asr bahanoah, we're machmer. That perhaps that in his anger he was thinking avodah zarah. So once a guy knows that it's wine, if he stirs it, even though you can always say that he's stirring it for another purpose, but when we don't know what's going on in his mind, the Chachamim said that this wine should be usher even bahanoah. And Rava retracted his original psak. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan ben Arzav, Rabbi Yossi ben Naroi, Rabbi Yossi v'koshosh lichamrei. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi was drinking wine. And then they finished their drink. Asahu Gavra. A man came. They didn't know if this man was the waiter was a Jew or a guy. Amr lay, they said, Ta ashkinan, pour us another drink that was in the pitcher, let's say. Now they knew it was wine. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi knew that what's in the pitcher is wine, but the waiter didn't know. We don't know what he thought was in the cup. They said, pour us a drink. Labasa dirama lekase. As soon as the waiter poured the liquid into their cups, Iglol Milsa the guy how it turned out that they knew that it was that the waiter was a guy. Now, what did the guy think? What did the waiter think he was pouring? If he knew he was pouring wine, so then it should be Asr Bahana. So that's why Chad Asr Vila Bahana. One of the Rabbi Yechon or Rabbi Yossi felt that it's Asr Bahana. We can't drink this the wine that's in our cup. The Khan and one of them said, "Shore afil b'shtia." You're allowed to even drink it. You're allowed to even drink it. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, "Man the Asr shaper Asr, man the Shari shaper Shari." The one that said it's Asr, he did it right. And one that said it's mutter, it says it's definitely mutter to drink. Mutter to drink. So what's the svara? Manda asa, one that held that it's asa. So you have to say that the waiter knew it was wine. Why did the waiter know it was wine? Because Meima Amar, because the waiter thinks to himself, Sal Kadaita Rabbani Kahana Shechur Kashasi. What else is in this pitcher? Does the rabbis drink with Anamid Beis? Does the rabbis drink beer? It must be wine. Alavada Hai Chamrahu. And then as he's pouring it, he had a mind to be menasach, to do something for libation for his avodah zarah. Might as well. I'm pouring it. Let me think about my avodah zarah. Mandashari, one that said it was mutter. Shapishari, he for sure says it's mutter. He says that the waiter had no idea that this was wine. Because the waiter thought to himself, do they drink wine? And they're going to tell a guy like me, pour me the wine? Elevade, he thought, the waiter thought that the rabbis are telling him, pour us what's in the pitcher, because the rabbis know that there's no wine in the pitcher. Shichruhu kushasi, they're drinking beer. So when the waiter was pouring the liquid from the pitcher, he thought what was in the pitcher was beer, and he didn't have intention to do libation. So therefore, it's mutter to even drink the stuff in the cup. That was one opinion. Says the Gemara, how could the waiter not know that it was wine? Doesn't he see what's in the pitcher? And says the Gemara, the story happened at night. Says the Gemara, doesn't he smell that it's wine? And says the Gemara, it was new wine that doesn't smell. So he couldn't even taste, he had no sense what was in the pitcher. Says the Gemara thought that he's not taking the wine that was in the pitcher. He actually had to take an empty pitcher and stick the pitcher into the barrel and take the wine. So the question is, Vokonoga be benatle. He's actually touching the wine that was in the pitcher, because maybe when he took it out of the barrel, he is touching it. That's like the guy touching the wine, And it becomes also very similar to the case where the guy comes down from the palm tree with the lulav and actually sticks the lulav into a barrel of wine. So here it is similar. He's touching the guy should be touching it without kavana, and therefore nobody, even the other opinion should hold at the very least, you shouldn't drink it. It may be mutter to sell, but to a guy, but you shouldn't drink it. And says the Gemara like tzricha de komayrik aruke. The barrel was already tipped, and he's just filling up the pitcher with the wine. So it's let's say he's moving the barrel without intention because he thinks what's in the barrel is beer. And if it's koyach shloi bekavana, means he's not touching what's in the barrel. He's actually moving what's in the barrel without intention, without knowing that it's beer, so without knowing that it's wine. So then it's loy gazer rabbanan. So therefore, like this, the one that held its mutter is is very simple because the waiter thinks that the rabbis wouldn't dare ask him to pour them a cup of wine. So the waiter thinks that he's dealing with beer. It was nighttime. He had no idea. It didn't smell. So he had no idea what he is dealing with is wine. And therefore, when he poured it, he had no intention to do nisach. So that's why one opinion held that it was mutter to drink that cup. But the other opinion held it's also to drink that cup because he wouldn't imagine rabbis sitting around drinking beer. So he must have known, the waiter must have known that it was wine, and therefore perhaps he had intention to do nisach. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Asi asked a question for Rabbi Yochanan. Here we have a cup full of undiluted wine, and the goy is pouring water into the undiluted wine. Is that so? Basically, imagine like chocolate milk. You have the powder and you pour the milk. So he's not pouring the wine, he's pouring the water that will dilute the wine. Maho. If a guy dilutes the wine in the cup of a Jew, what's the din with that wine? Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Asi, why are you using such a funny language, shemasachi, to dilute the ema mizagai? Why don't you use the language mazgai, that the guy dilutes it? Amalei anok. I'm trying to use a pasuk in the Tanakh, which uses the word dilution maschai. Tafcha tifcha mascha yenei. So there's a pasuk in Mishlei that when it uses the word dilution, it uses the word mascha. Amalei. So it's very interesting. Rabbi Yochanan tells Rabbi Asi, Lashon Torah la'atzmai, but Lashon Chachamim la'atzmai. You should not use the language of maschai. You should be using the language mazgai because that's the way the rabbis talk with each other. In other words, use the yeshivish sprach. Don't use the Tanakh sprach in an obscure pasuk. But the question still stands. Goy is doing the dilution of the water, of the wine. What's the deal with that wine? Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan answered, Asur, it's Asur, Mishum Lech Lech, Amrim Naziris, Charsar, Lekamaloi Tikrav. We say that we don't want to have the goy should be so removed from anything to do with Jewish wine. Just like you tell a Nazir, the Nazir cannot eat grapes, so that he shouldn't eat wine. And we tell the Nazir, don't even go cut through a vineyard to get to where you're going. Go around the vineyard. Don't even come near the vineyard because we don't want you to even come close to a vineyard, which you might be tempted to squeeze grapes and make wine, whatever. So that's the same concept. We don't want either goy pouring, diluting wine for a yid, and therefore we don't allow them to even pour the water into the wine. Rav Yirmiyah Ikal Safta Chazel Chamra Damazga Goy Ishti Yisrael Minei. Rav Yirmiyah came to this place called Safta, and he saw a wine that the guy was diluting, and the Jew was drinking from it. And he asked Mishum Lech Lech Amu Naziris Charschar Lakamaloi Tikrav, because we tell the guy go around the vineyard and don't even enter the vineyard, so that you don't be tempted to drink to make wine. Itmenami, same idea. Am Rabbi Yochanan, Amri la Rabasi, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Yayin, Shemazraga Goy. If a guy was diluted the wine, he didn't even pour the wine, he just poured the water into the wine. Asr, Lech Lech, Amrim Nazir, Schar Kamalei Tikrav. Says the Gemara another story. And we're going to end with this story. Rish Lakish Ikla Batzra. Rish Lakish came to this place called Batzra, which was a place in Babylon. But, you know, Eretz Yisrael is really not what it is today. Eretz Yisrael, in time, the way the Chumash describes, is a huge, huge place. It might even extend to Bavel, Iraq. Chazi Yisrael, the Ka'achli Peir de Masre. He's seeing a Jew in Batzra that's eating fruits that did not have meiser. Va'asalu, and he said, "Oh, that this um, whatever that Jew is eating is aser." Now it's bavel, so bavel is potter for meisers, but Rav Rish Lakish felt that the Chumash uses in describing Israel uses a place called Batzra as one of the places in Israel. So he felt that this place Batzra should have a chiyuv of Trumas and Maisris. So they have an obligation to give off Trumas and Maisris as if it was in Eretz Yisrael. That's one thing Rish Lakish came. In Va'asr Lahu, and he asked it. Then he saw Chazu Maya the Sagade Legoyim, V'Shasi Yisrael. He saw water, let's say a public water fountain, that Goyim were bowing to that public water fountain. V'Shasi Yisrael. Jews were drinking from that water fountain. So what did he do? So Va'asalu, he asked the water from the water fountain. Also, the comment of Rabbi Yochanan, he came to Rabbi Yochanan and he asked Rabbi Yochanan that I do correctly. Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan said, while you're still wearing your coat, go back to those places and matter everything that you're answered. Betzer lav hainu batzra. The betzer that's in the Chumash that says betzer is part of Israel, that's not batzra in Bavel. So batzra is potter from Trumas and Maisers, so the Jew is eating without Trumas and Maisers, he's doing nothing wrong. And the other place, the other thing that you did, you asked the water in the water fountain because Goyim were bowing to it. A public fountain of water cannot be aser just because one Goy bows to it. Because even if many Goyim bow to it, it's a public thing. Rabbi Yochanan Tamei. Rabbi Yochanan is to his aligns himself with his opinion. Rabbi Yochanan Shum Rabbi Shua ben Tzaddik, Rabbi Shimon ben Yahid Tzaddik, Maim Shal Rabim Einin Asarim. Water belonging to the public, Einin Asarim can never become Asr just because you're bowing to it. It's almost like bowing to the mountains, and therefore the mountains remain mutter. Okay? Good Shabbos.